Hello everybody, this is ManuS and welcome to another Eternal Top Decks video series. So today it's finally time to reveal my latest take on Argenport Midrange with this Argenport V4 update. I have tested the deck quite extensively since the Invitational, playing like 120 games on ladder with it to try and figure out what I think the ideal list for the deck is, and fine-tune it, and I come up with a list that I'm really happy with and pretty sure it's close to, if not perfect, for Argenport to just have the most consistent and well-rounded, smooth operating version of Argenport for you guys. Alright, so let's take a look at the deck. This is the deck list. There's not too much room for innovation at this point. The core of the deck is mostly figured out broadly and sort of to an extent builds itself. There's just like fine-tuning options within the power base and some of the more flexible slots and card choices in the main deck. So first of all, we have 26 units, 4 Crownwatch Paladin, 4 Ripknife, Assassin, 4 Auric Interrogator, 4 Unseen Commando, 4 Valkyrie Enforcer, 2 Crownwatch Traitor, and 4 Tavrod. So you basically see almost all of these as 4-off, like all the 4-offs in almost all of the lists. There are like maybe some people that still kind of opt to not run Crownwatch and Ripknife as their 2-drops and might run like Ripknife and Instigator, for example, or even run more than 8 2-drops. But other than that, all lists by now should include the 12 3-drops and the 4 Tavrod, and at least the 4 Ripknife Assassin as one of the 2-drops. The 4-drop slot varies drastically. There are people that run 0 4-drop units, there are people that run up to 6 potentially, and there are people that prefer Doom over Traitor, although Traitor seems to have caught on quite a bunch. So first of all, I only run 2 Traitor simply because I don't want to run too many units, and I also don't want to run too clunky of a 4-cost slot. But I also tried just running 0 4-drop units for a while, because Hammer is so good and I really wanted for Hammer, but that felt a little too threat light, and eventually I added 2 Crownwatch Traitors to balance out the threat density, and that seemed like a pretty good number. I like Traitor a bit better than Doom for various reasons. First of all, it makes your biggest threat outside of Tavrod also immune to Annihilate, which is a nice bonus. Without any buffs, it actually is immune to Vanquish, which is nice. So it denies the opponent further tempo plays, since the only early play that can be vanquished is Interrogator. So you have a lot of curving out potential that just blanks the opponent's Vanquish for quite some time, which obviously you cannot generally blank Vanquish for an entire game, but it's nice to be able to blank Vanquish early to deny the opponent tempo swings with it in the first critical turns. So when you're ahead enough, then the opponent can start vanquishing and the tempo blows are much less significant because you're already in a good position. The other thing is the Endurance makes it immune to Permafrost, making Permafrost much weaker against the deck overall than it used to be. And yeah, the Quick Draw makes it in certain situations more potent attacker than Doom when facing other flyers, and the Endurance also makes it a much better unit in games where you're behind. Impending Doom is really bad when you're behind usually, because not attacking with it is kind of problematic because the clock runs against you still, while Crownwatch Traitor lets you pressure the opponent while also blocking against aggressive decks. It's particularly good against more aggressive decks. And yeah, against a lot of cards it's just as if it was a 5/5. Against some cards it's worse, against some cards it's better. It's better against Vanquish, it's worse against Torch and Lightning Strike. Torch can sometimes be a problem, or Lightning Strike, since it's a pretty big tempo swing being hit by those, but in the end you dodge other tempo swings like Annihilate and Permafrost, so you kind of just trade them there and get the upside of being able to attack and block. And the other thing is cards like Lightning Strike and Torch will often be already aggressively used against your 2 and 3 drops, so they shouldn't be left too often to hit your Crownwatch Traitor, so that downside is mitigated there a bunch. So yeah, I've been pretty happy with Traitor over Doom. So the fact that it requires double Justice and double Shadow is a bit of a downside, but so far I liked Traitor a bit better than Doom, partially also because it synergizes with Commandos, making it even bigger, and the quick draw also lets weapons and the quick draw and the endurance lets weapons and Warcry buffs have a bigger impact. But I could see people just liking Doom a bit better and playing Doom in this place. It's totally fine. But the other thing is, since you have Inquisitor's Blade now providing flying, the flying on Doom is a little less relevant, since if you have an Inquisitor's Blade and slam it on your 4-drop, then you're kind of not getting anything out of it if the 4-drop is a Doom, while with Crownwatch Traitor you create an 8/4 quick draw flyer that on defense is 4/8 flying as a blocker, making it a really good blocker that basically can hold off anything, while on an impending Doom weapons in general are less powerful, and Inquisitor's Blade specifically, so that's another minor thing that makes me favor Traitor a bit more, because the fact that it doesn't have flying is sometimes not even relevant, and yeah, works better with Blade. Then we have a bunch of spells. Sorry, I'm still having a bit of a cough. So yeah, we have for Sabotage, pretty straightforward here. Pretty sure for Sabotage is right. I'm not the biggest fan of just running 3. I think Sabotage is one of the big draws of these Justice Shadow-based midrange decks, or generally Shadow-based midrange decks. It provides a lot of anti-tempo in a sense, since it prevents a lot of the tempo swingy plays that your opponent can make against you preemptively, and clears the path for some critical plays like slapping a weapon on a good unit or sticking a Tavrod, for example. And now that Protect is so bad, since it got nerfed and costs twice as much as before and is basically near unplayable, Sabotage became even better. And yeah, I'm just really happy with the card and don't really see a reason to run less than 4, since it mostly just is weak against time midrange decks. Against almost every other archetype I like the card and tend to not board it out. Then we have a removal suit of 4 Slay and 2 Vanquish. I really don't like just running 4 Slay, it's simply not enough. There's too many high impact big units that can take over the game on their own, or that can simply just stall you out too well, so you need enough answers, and 6 has been a reasonable amount between the Deadly from Ripknife, Silence, Flying, weapons making your units bigger or giving them flying, or just helping with Favor or Runehammer to clear the path. But yeah, I wouldn't run less than the 6. And I think something like Finest Hour that people have been trying is not a good replacement, because it doesn't remotely make up for the tempo swing and answer potential of something like a Vanquish. And also in the mirror, having less answers to Tavrod and big weaponed up units or interrogators is a pretty big downside, so I really think you need at least those 6 removal to get anywhere consistently. With 4, I tried 4 for a bit, and you just sit there too often needing an answer and not having one, and something like a Vanquish would just break the game wide open for you. And in terms of weapons, I have 4 Bloodletter and 2 Inquisitor's Blade. I tried anything from 2 to 4. when I didn't have any 4-drop units, I basically had 4 blades and 4 Runehammers and only 29 power in the beginning. I quickly cut the Force Blade for 30's power, since the 29 power just feels wonky and ambitious in a deck with Tavrod, since unlike some other 5-cost cards like say Blade in FJP Blade, Tavrod gets worse with every turn later that you stick him in a lot of matchups. Against aggro, every turn you cannot play him, he cannot shut them down and stabilize them, because especially Skycrack, for example, is completely shut down by Tavrod landing, so it's absolutely critical to be able to play it on curve. And against other mid-range decks, it's the same. The later you drop a Tavrod, the easier it is for them to gank block him and just kill him in combat, sometimes even for free. So the earlier you drop him, the more likely you can attack without losing your Tavrod and start generating value. So it's absolutely critical to hit your 5th power on turn 5 every time you have a Tavrod, and in general curving out, so playing an extra power to make sure you hit your power drops and curve out is absolutely worth it. I would not want to run the deck with less than 30 power. I mean, we even ran 31 for the longest time, and with the introduction of Crests, we were willing to go down to 30, but seeing all these 29 power lists, that just seems greedy and unnecessarily leaving like consistency and win percentage by the wayside in favor of hoping to draw more business. But if that business is stuck in your hand because you can only play 1 card a turn, or can't play half your hand because you're stuck on like 3 power, and if you look at the Invitational, so many games have been decided by influence and power issues with Argenport because people are just too greedy and skimping on power. So anyone that saw that and should draw the reasonable conclusion of just adding that power and making the power base more consistent. Like, I think most of the mirrors, someone was color and or power screwed, and you really don't want to lose games like that if you don't have to. And drawing that extra power, most games, even when you don't need it, will not make or break you. If you really flood out, it's gonna be multiple powers extra, and that 1 power is not gonna make or break you. But drawing that extra power in a time of need will make all the difference. And yeah, then the last card basically is just 3 Auric Runehammer. I really wish I could fit 4, but I simply just can't. Oh, I forgot to talk about why there's 2 Blade. And yeah, I played with Blade a bunch more, and eventually decided that I only really want 2 because the card is clunky and not the most powerful. The main reason why I want them anyways is basically because they're really nice with Tavrod, both with the Destiny and just to give Tavrod flying to make it easier to attack on stalled boards, and first and foremost basically to just make Interrogator activate as often as possible, because it is one of the best cards, if not the best card in the deck now. And they also come in handy to make Crownwatch Paladin matter more later in the game when it's stalled out. So having some is nice, but the card is clunky and plays horribly from behind. So I rather have more cards that are either threats on their own or play better from behind or help me deal with issues. Having too many, drawing a bunch of clunky blades when you're struggling to survive and stabilize, say in the mirror for example, is a good way to lose games that you shouldn't be losing, and the card just doesn't provide enough power and upside to make up for that, aside from the fact that it, like, some cards are just so powerful and have enough upside to make up for being bad when behind, that they are still worth it, but Blade is just a pretty mediocre card, so I can only recommend not really running more than 2 in your deck. And now to Runehammer. I really wish there was 4 and I could fit 4, but I still kind of like the second Inquisitor's Blade better than the 4th Runehammer for now, and everything else is not really cuttable. I don't want to go down to 29 power, and I also really don't want to go down to 3 Sabotage to fit the 4th Runehammer, so 3 Runehammer it is. Because these are like the only options, and I also don't want to run less units, given that I tried that a fair share. But yeah, the 4th Runehammer is the first card I would add if I had another slot in the deck. But there isn't, so it's 3 Runehammer and the 4th is in the board, because the card is so good. It's so good in the mirror, it's so good against control, it's pretty solid against aggro when you have a bunch of blockers, and then you can start picking off their units to make sure they cannot like go wide enough against your blockers and push through and finish you off. The card is just amazing, and it's also still the best or one of the best hits with Tavrod, because a 9/1 hammer cleans house like nothing else. So yeah, the card is still really, really good, and I couldn't see running any less than 3, and wish I could run 4. That's like the thing that bothers me the most, that I cannot find a good way to fit the 4th Runehammer, but sometimes you just gotta settle with what you have, because there's only so much room, and it's better to run 75 cards with 3 Runehammer than 76 cards with 4 Runehammers probably. So that's why I settled with it, and also you don't want to get your 4 drop too clunky and stuff like that. And yeah, the power base, pretty straightforward except for the diplomatic seals. So the deal here is basically I initially went from 29 to 30 power with a monument. That monument just didn't have that much impact, felt a bit greedy. The deck already can have very clunky power development draws with crest, seeds, and banner combinations without any sigils or stuff like that. So having to skip your 2-drop is really bad just because you have a depleted power. So I wanted to maximize ready power, so cutting a depleted non-basic power that also makes your seeds worse made a lot of sense. And I also had more games that I lost to being mono shadow or mono justice draws on redraws especially than I was happy with. And also now we have more influence strain with having a double shadow 3-drop and double justice 2-drops, and also potentially wanting to sabotage on turn 1. So best solution to that is, since the deck maximum requirements are pretty low at double justice, double shadow, is just adding diplomatic seals. They provide extra ready power sources that are flexible at what you need them to be. They provide extra turn 1 shadow for sabotage without flooding yourself with shadow. Like if I have a shadow sigil and a diplomatic seal, I'm happy that the diplomatic seal is a diplomatic seal and not a shadow sigil. But if I have a justice sigil and a diplomatic seal, I get to play my turn 1 sabotage still. The flexibility is a big deal. It also allows me to flexibly provide the influence for whatever 3-drop I happen to have a lot of the time, and they are also ready power sources for my early turns. So yeah, they basically bring up the numbers of influence and ready sources significantly. Like now I happen to have up to 12 turn 1 ready shadow sources for sabotage, which is nice. I have 20 shadow sources in total without Vara's favor, making it more likely that I can play an Interrogator on turn 3 without having to use Vara's favor on turn 2 to do so. So I can more easily go 2-drop into Interrogator if that's my only 3-drop, which is a big deal. And in terms of Justice, we even go up to 21 Justice sources, which is pretty nice for having 8 double Justice 3-drops. So yeah, Seal just adds a lot of flexibility and smoothness to the early power development without really hurting the deck. Sure, it makes the seeds a bit worse, but given that it introduces additional color fixing and makes it that much less likely that you lose due to influence screw, like a fair share of Argenport people did in the Invitational, is totally worth it. The deck is basically a prime candidate for running Diplomatic Seal even with the crests, because the requirements are steep in the early turns, the deck wants to curve out, and so on and so forth, and you don't really want to cut down on crests, for example, because crest is still pretty good and the deck is not aggressive enough to not afford crests. But yeah, introducing more ready power sources and more fixing is a great way here. And yeah, Seek Power is not a good solution because it just makes the deck slower and clunkier than the power development already is. So yeah, that's the list. It runs very round and smoothly. I'm having a win rate of over 60%, I think around 62% over 120 games at the moment. Or is it? No, it's actually 61. I was at like 63 at around 100 games, and the last 20 games I went like 10 and 10 because I'm having some really bad downswing right now, no matter what I touch. But yeah, the deck has been performing really well on ladder for me, and has just been operating pretty well the way it is. So I can only recommend, if you want to play Argenport, this is the 75. You should submit in jam on ladder. Yeah, as usual, gonna hop into some games to show it in action. Gonna run 6 games in ranked with it, see if we can do better than I have been doing like the last 1 or 2 days on ladder with really anything. But yeah, these downswings happen. Before that I was doing really well with all the good decks that I played, and now I'm doing horribly. Alright, stay tuned for game 1 coming up next.